Hi, welcome back to another part of our conversation about the things I believe, and particularly as we are going through the Ten Commandments. And today we're going to look at the 8th commandment. The 8th commandment says, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." And Dr. Martin Luther, as he comments on this commandment, asks the question, what does it mean? And answers it by saying, you should fear and love God so that you do not deceitfully lie about, betray, backbite, nor slander your neighbor, but defend him, speak well of him, and put the most charitable construction on all that he does. If there is anything that I regret, and I shouldn't even say if, there are things that I regret as I look back on my 60 years of life. And most of the things that I regret are things that I've said. Too often in my life I have spewed unkind words, even hateful words. James, in his letter, cautions us about how we use our tongues. He gives us 3 little illustrations, and we find this in James chapter 3. 3 metaphors, 3 pictures for how we ought to understand our tongues and the power of what we say. He compares our tongues to a bit. That is a piece of metal, maybe a ½ inch in diameter, maybe 8 or so inches long, that is put into the mouth of a horse and is used to control where the horse goes. Another picture that he gives us is that of the rudder on a ship. It's just, when you compare it to the entire ship, a small little piece that kind of hangs off the back end of the ship underwater and connected to the steering mechanism of the ship directs the ship in the direction that it goes. But a very small piece of the ship. He also suggests that the words that we use, that our tongues are like a spark, a flame. I love sitting around a campfire, watching as logs explode and embers shoot up into the night sky. But I'm always aware when I am around a campfire of where those embers are landing and making sure that they don't land in some dry brush or some dry leaves and ignite there and start a fire. When I was in early high school, I went on a camping hike with a couple of friends, and that evening we camped in a grove of small trees, large shrubs I guess they probably were, and we'd built a fire. And thinking, as we went to bed, that if I spread out the logs of the fire that they would extinguish themselves, I rolled one of the logs outside of the fire ring. I was warned in the morning by our adult companion of the danger that I had caused. That had a breeze come up and ignited that log, we would have been in terrible danger, that it could have started a terrible fire. That just a little bit of flame with a little bit of wind behind it can cause great damage. And so it is with our words. Our tongue is obviously a tool. It doesn't operate by itself, just like the bit in a horse's mouth does not operate by itself, or the rudder of a ship does not operate by itself. Those are controlled by the rider and the reins, by the captain, or whoever it is that's steering the ship. So it is that our tongues are controlled by our minds and by the things that we think. And so in this commandment, we are encouraged to think about the reputation and honor of our neighbor, and recognizing that our neighbor has intrinsic value because our neighbor is created in the image of God. And that value needs to be honored, and that value needs to be upheld. And so that we need to be careful in the things that we say, so that we do not damage our neighbor, that we do not damage our neighbor's reputation, that we do not hurt our neighbor with our words. I think there are a couple of higher principles that we can see in this commandment, not just the honor of our neighbor, but the fact that our neighbor is created in the image of God. And so ultimately, as we are careful with our words and not bear false witness, that we are honoring God, that we are honoring the Creator, the one who gives us our intrinsic value. I also think of the fact that this commandment could very well be applied in the court of law. That to bear false witness would be to say something untrue, or to say something maybe even true but in a malicious way, hoping for judgment against the neighbor in the court of law. Certainly we may be at some time in our life called upon as witnesses to some event that happens around us, and that we are charged to tell the truth in the court of law. And this command says to us that we are not to bear false witness, that we are to speak the truth, obviously to speak the truth in love, but to speak the truth. And I am reminded then of what God has done for us in sending Jesus. We read that he is the propitiation for us and that he is our advocate. First of all, that he is the one who offered himself as the final and perfect sacrifice to appease God's wrath, to take away our sin, to offer us forgiveness from the judgment that must be pronounced against us. And so then also he then is our advocate. So consider this. We are before the throne of the Almighty Judge. And the judge asks us, as a judge here on earth would ask, how do you plead? If we think that we can plead not guilty, we are deceiving ourselves. As we read in 1 John, if we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves. And so all we can do as we are standing before the court, before Almighty Judge, is say, Your Honor, I am guilty. I have broken your commandments. I cannot in any way meet the standard that I need in order to be welcomed into your presence. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And just as the judge is about to pronounce his judgment against me, and in this case this is an eternal judgment, and the penalty is an eternal separation from the presence of God, cast into the outer darkness where there is no end to suffering, no end to the gnashing of teeth, no end to sorrow, because God will not be there. Just as that judgment is to be handed down, and rightly so, Jesus steps before the judge. And Jesus reminds him of what he has done for us. That he has paid the price. That he died in our place. That he suffered that which we ought to suffer in death, so that we could be freed from our sin and death. And so as we are reminded to not bear false witness, we can be thankful that we are created in God's image and given intrinsic value because of that, and that our words should honor that in each other as we honor our Creator. And then to be reminded of what Jesus has done for us. That as we are encouraged not to bear false witness, we would not bear false witness against ourselves in declaring that we are just when we are not. And then being eternally grateful and thankful for what Jesus has done for us. That he has taken our place in judgment. And that in so doing, as we confess our sins, he forgives our sins and cleanses us from all unrighteousness. Thank you for joining me for these conversations. God bless you.